Is this not one of the coolest intros to a final boss in a turn-based JRPG ever? Romancing SaGa 3 is the third game in the Romancing SaGa trilogy, which itself is part of Square Enix's long-running SaGa series. It was originally released in Japan on the Super Famicom in 1995 and later released worldwide in 2019. It's one of my favorite JRPGs, so today I thought we'd take a deep dive into the game and demystify its alluring complexity. And the best way to do that is to actually play it. So right off the bat, the game tells you its story in text. There's not much to spoil when it comes to story in this game. But to sum up the intro, every 300 years the dark star blocks the sun in an event called the Rise of Marastrum. Everyone born in the year of the event perished before the end of the year. One year a child survived it and, seduced by the power of death, used that power to summon the four lords of the abyss known as the Sinistrals to conquer the world. This child came to be known as the Archfiend, and he disappeared. The Sinistrals continued to crush the world under their heels since their summoning. 300 years later, another survivor of the event, known as the Matriarch, used the aid of mighty allies to drive the Sinistrals back into the pit and seal the gates behind them. This game takes place nearly 2 decades after the most recent rise of the Marastrum and over 300 years since the Matriarch sealed the gates. It's unknown whether there will be another Child of Destiny or whether this Child of Destiny will be righteous, evil, or of an entirely unfathomable nature. Right away the game gives you a choice of male or female protagonist. Among the males, Khalid gets a unique dungeon, Mikhail needs to complete a complicated war minigame to proceed in his story, and Thomas has a bit more story available to him involving the game's business minigame I'll be talking about more later. Julian has some story options with Monica, one of the other possible protagonists on the female side. For females, Katerina has some unique story scenes, and is also only playable if you choose her as the protagonist. Monica is with Julian. I honestly never noticed anything special with Ellen when I completed my playthrough with her, and we're going with Sarah, so I'll talk about her as we play. Because one choice isn't complicated enough, we also get to choose a star that adds bonus stats to the character. Best way to do it is just to select a star and see what it does to your stats, and if you don't like it, just select another one. Oh look, more choices. I already know I'm going to go with Bow and the Hermes star, so I'll select that, and I'm going to explain the relationship between the weapon choices and the stats as we play. So with the Bow on Sarah, we want high dex. It's a stat that determines your overall weapon hit rate and damage, specifically with the bow or the short sword. Your weapon choice will also alter your stats along with the choice of star, but in general you want to choose your weapon first and then adjust your choice of star around obtaining optimal stats for your chosen weapon. As each character starts with different stats too, it can somewhat inform you of good possible weapon choices. Your weapon choice is extremely important as it will determine which skills will be easiest to spark on your main character. In general, whatever weapon you choose is the weapon you'll primarily want to use on your main character. Strength is the primary damage stat for every other weapon type in the game, but martial skill also can use constitution and dexterity for some skills. It's also a good idea for axe users to have a decent amount of dex to compensate for lower hit rates. The Nun choice of weapon will give a nice intelligence boost to characters if you want to make them offensive magic users, but it won't make them particularly useful for sparking weapon skills. It's a good choice if you want to put a magic crown on your main character, which is another mechanic I'll explain a little later. Any other character in your party besides the protagonist has a default weapon they're good at sparking skills with, which is usually the weapon they come into your party equipped with. Unless you know what you're doing, it's just best to keep that weapon type on the character for the whole game, or at least until you replace them with another character. So Sarah begins the game with the other sea-known settlers, Thomas, Julian, and her sister Ellen at the inn. We get a scene of Monica trying to deliver an urgent message to her brother, but Khalid exposes her as the sister of Mikhail, the Marquis of Loan. We get a good grasp of Khalid's money-hungry personality, which is also represented by a hidden greed stat that will punish players for accepting money too much for quest rewards. The punishment for accepting money too much when there is a choice is usually that quest chains become closed off and undoable in a playthrough. So Monica bands together with the sea-known settlers and Khalid to get the message to her brother. The game employs symbol encounters, so there are no random battles in this game. However, if you're dashing when an enemy hits you, it will throw your formation out of array. Most of the characters in the game come with unique formations that you can obtain by recruiting them into your party. The particular formation we're using right now comes with Khalid, and it draws most of the aggro to the central character. Battles typically take place in a turn-based format where you select all the actions for your party members, and then your party members and the enemies move in an order according to their speed stat measured against a hidden calculation between their equipment weight and their strength. With higher weapon skill levels and more difficult enemies, it becomes more likely for characters to spark new skills when they take action in battle. Just now, Sarah sparked the Shadow Weave skill off of her normal attack. When a skill is sparked, it uses no skill points. However, future uses of the skill will take skill points from the character. Also, after sparking the skill, the character has to master it before it can be used by everybody else. or taken off to be used later. Using a spark skill at least once in a battle will give it a chance of being mastered at the end of the battle. Thomas starts with water magic. Using water magic gives him a chance for his water magic skill to level up and his max MP total to rise at the end of the battle. It also contributes toward changing the battlefield element to water or neutralizing a different battlefield element that may already exist. Using magic and skills compatible with the battlefield element will typically strengthen their effects in some ways. Applying status ailments like paralysis and blindness can be very important for shutting down strong enemies' attacks in this game. After several squall spells, Thomas has managed to change the battlefield into the water element. So now his spells are doing a little bit more damage. At the end of a fight, characters can gain weapon skill levels, spell element skill levels, max MP, and max hit points. Any spark skills used may be mastered or acquired at this point too. Characters always start each battle at max hit points, so there's no need to recover between fights, but SP and LP will remain depleted until recovered with items or arrested and in. I'll talk more about what LP is later when it's relevant to my gameplay. So we successfully get Monica to Mikhail to deliver the message, and now we need to escort her to Podorui. Mikhail recognizes Khalid and takes him away from us before we make our way to town. Fortunately, he does leave us with some supplies, and Sarah gets a cute little scene here since she's our main character. I went into the menu and equipped everybody with everything that Mikhail gave us, and I also changed the formation to the Hunter's Gambit with Sarah in the center. It lowers her speed, but it should improve her performance with the bow. The path to Podorui is uneventful. Podorui itself reminds me a lot of Narsh from Final Fantasy VI without the steam technology. There is a place to buy lunar magic, but our party will be changing around a lot, and it's a waste to invest in party members that won't be with us until the end of the game. The town is lorded over by a vampire named Leonid, and we need to make our way to his castle up north. Leonid greets us shortly after we walk in, immediately starts flirting with Monica, and says we are welcome to stay, but warns us against wandering around. Just for fun, I'll show you what happens when we wander around. The enemies easily smoke my party, but losing all hit points in battle only results in losing life points, or LP. When all LP is depleted, the character is kicked out of the party and would need to be found and recruited again. If the protagonist's LP is completely depleted, it's game over. Characters who are already down will lose an LP if they are hit again. So in long fights, it's important to use HP restoring spells or items to revive characters. Fortunately, it's pretty easy to flee in this game, and it's definitely worth considering when you're having problems. Anyways, after some fun, if cliched, scenes of the party trying to get a good night's rest with a bunch of ghosts and demons wandering around, Leonid gives us a little adventure to do while things cool off. This also introduces us to the world map feature where we can select the Podorui cave. Battles in this cave begin with the earth field element. Also, I'll show you what happens when you run into an enemy instead of walk into an enemy. Your formation just breaks. There's no real goal in the cave, but you can find some really nice treasures in there, including 2,000 gold and a Staff of Vivacity. The Staff of Vivacity can be equipped on any character and used in battle to completely recover your party's hit points. The staff will break afterwards, but it's still the best way to recover your entire party in an emergency situation in an important battle. When we return to Leonid's castle after the treasure hunt, we learn that Mikhail successfully fought off his contender for the throne. Scenes take us to Loan, where Mikhail deems everyone heroes and rewards them. You can see Katerina too, but you'll have to play her story if you want to know what happens with her. You can see Monica in her princess regalia too. As an aside, seeing Mikhail on that throne really gives me Romancing SaGa 2 vibes. That's really the majority of longer scenes and exposition in this game. It just dumps us in Loan alone with no real goal. From now on, we've got a huge open world to explore, but to unlock locations, we need to talk to a lot of people and do some travel by ship. One of the first things I always do at this point is open up the blacksmith and recruit all the blacksmiths scattered around the world. Since blacksmiths unlock new items with the number of battles between smithings, it just makes sense to do that first. The pub can be used to part with recruited allies. At the beginning of the game, you can choose to accompany Thomas for a free ship to Pedona like I'm doing here, or Khalid to the north. The choice doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but the blacksmith is in Pedona. There's also a warehouse in Pedona to store items, so it makes it a great base of operations in the game in general. You can also learn a little bit about what Julian's doing, and Ellen will join you too since you're her sister. But you don't have to accept her into the party. Accepting Tom and Ellen into the party, though, lets me spark and start mastering lance, axe, and martial arts skills, even if Thomas and Ellen won't be in my party at the end of the game. One of the best things you can do in Romancing SaGa 3 once the world opens up is to simply talk to everybody wherever you are and go to all the new locations that open up to do the same. Talking to this NPC just unlocked the Mount Tafton location for me. There's no verbal quest or reason for me to go there yet, but it's there when I need to go in the future. We're done with Loan now, so let's make our way to Mule so so we can catch the ship to Pedona. Focus on filling your party up with 4 or 5 people. Leave a 6th slot open for any temporary characters that may join as part of a side quest you may find. In the very beginning, up to the point where your characters have about an average of 250 max HP, pretty much every unlockable quest should be doable at your beginning strength level. Some of these quests will unlock future quests too, as long as you don't accept money as a reward when given the option due to the greed stat I talked about earlier. Just about every recruitable character in Romancing SaGa 3 that isn't a protagonist choice has some unique features to them, and many will give you new formations to use in battle too when recruited for the very first time. For example, you'll probably see this gentleman after looking around the town. He is the minstrel, and if you have a full party, he'll sing some songs that give you some interesting background information on important events in the game. If you don't have a full party, he will force himself into your party and you'll have to seal a sinistral gate before he will leave. He's a very decent swordsman and has a special party-wide stat buffing skill that scales with high martial arts levels too. So even if you get him by accident, you can at least use him to spark sword skills for future party members. I just mentioned this because it's highly unlikely you'll be strong enough to seal a gate until the mid-game. And you'll also very likely meet this weirdo in random places. She's sort of like a lottery character. Her name is Tatiana, and she'll forcibly join you if she engages with you 3 times. Her spark type is sword, but apparently if you save and load the game, she becomes a short sword type, so it's possible to spark a lot of different weapon skills with her. As if that weren't complicated enough, she'll sometimes join under different names of desserts, which also determine her best magic affinities. I never actually use her because she's too confusing for me, but for a 14-year-old girl, she has an incredibly nice stat spread as well. If she joins you, it's possible to kick her out only by going to the town of Libroff. Her backstory is interesting if you talk to enough people in Libroff to learn more about it. Neither Minstrel nor Tatiana give you a formation when you recruit them, so it's best to just avoid them if you don't have a full party and don't want them in your party. We do get a bit of a scene on the boat going from Mules to Pedona. Thomas immediately has business to attend to with his uncle, leaving us to explore the town and find the blacksmith. Nora here is an incredibly strong recruit. She's also the only recruitable character who has a natural mace spark type and a great option to fill any party's need for a blunt damage dealer. Her unique feature is only applicable if she doesn't join your party though, as she'll give you an extra choice when it's time to forge new equipment, like an extra blacksmith. The legend is that the first master smith here worked with the matriarch to reforge the Sinistral Elasis's demon spear into the matriarch spear. After the matriarch closed all the gates, the spear was put on display in the workshop and it became their trademark. Smiths everywhere came here to learn the trade. However, during the battle between Ludwig and Clemens, the matriarch spear was stolen and Nora's father went to look for it. When he finally went to retrieve it, he was murdered and the smiths all left the smithy. Nora decides to look for her father's killer and gives you the option to recruit her. Since it's always possible to have her leave the party to smith later, I almost always accept her right away. Nora has 2 hints about the identity of the killer, a red coral earring and the word jackal. Talking to the blacksmith afterwards opens up a task to bring all the blacksmiths spread around the world back so they can forge new equipment, and that is exactly what we'll do. The townsfolk of Pedona also have some very interesting things to say. The first blacksmith can actually be found on the 2nd floor of a large home on the northeast side of Pedona. All of the blacksmiths actually look the same too. So once you've found one, the rest are pretty easy to find in the other towns. After recruiting a smith, you can assign them to weapon or armor forging. I usually keep them equal, but prioritize armor if there's an odd number of smiths. I also don't start actually forging anything until I've recruited all the smiths so I have the most options. In the basement of a building around the center of Pedona is also the warehouse, which is another very important location since you do have an inventory limit in this game. And last but not least, inside the weapon shop is an old man who serves as your treasury. Any Aurum you earn over 10,000 is stored here. Since there are expensive powerful spells you can purchase later, it's important to remember you can pick up extra Aurum you've earned here. We're going to go north to the town of Stanley first, and after talking to everyone to unlock locations, the pub is our point of interest here. The gentleman at the counter gives us a mercenary job that pays 1,500 Aurums and will serve as an introduction to the war minigame for most characters who are not Mikhail. To be honest, I've avoided playing the game as Mikhail because I find this minigame to be confusing, but it's quite deep with a bunch of formations and attack options to learn. My strategy here is to destroy their commander and then get a morale advantage before laying into the survivors. Like Minstrel, we'll sometimes see this character in random locations. This is Young Boy, and Sarah can recruit him at any time, but other characters will only be able to recruit him after they've sealed the 4th Abyss Gate. He's super strong and starts with a greatsword, but he has a unique spark type that can spark some special skills on a variety of weapons. I'm going to ignore him for now, but he does come with a formation you can get from another character later on too. Anyways, the blacksmith is just to the left of the war minigame guy. After we get him settled in, it's off to the next town, Pharos. Again, I talk to everybody to unlock any locations. The blacksmith in Pharos is also located in the pub, so we nab grab him, get him set up, leave use the ship at Pedona to get to Wilmington's Inn and Ryblov's pub to recruit the last 2 blacksmiths. I set 4 smiths on weapons and 2 smiths on armor for now. I'm going to use Nora for a while to acquire some mace techs, but I plan on having her smith later. Then I got them started crafting. It usually takes about 10 to 15 battles until they're ready to craft something else. With the blacksmiths all sorted out, it's finally time to start questing. I went back to Stanley to recruit young boy to get us up to 4 party members. Then I entered Muse's home on the west side of Pedona to start up one of the first entry-level side quests in this game. A boy went missing at the Archfiend's palace and we have to find him. Thomas and Charles, both lance users, join us to put us up to 6 party members. We'll be doing all our battles in this quest in commander mode by putting Sarah in the 6th slot of the formation and using the other 5 party members. I'll explain commander mode a little later. Charles has underwhelming strength and dexterity, but his magic stat is very respectable and he starts with fire magic level at 15, so he can be used as a decent mage. Max HP, max MP, and max SP are the only stats that can increase after battle, but his weapon and fire magic skill levels can improve with use. His spark type is a special lance type that can also spark a lot of sword and greatsword techs, so he can be used to acquire many new skills even with his low strength stat, but due to his high max MP and max SP, he cannot get a crown. A skill crown lowers skill point usage by 1 point when using any weapon or martial arts skills. It also makes sparking weapon skills easier. A magic crown lowers MP cost of all spells on the user by 1 MP. A skill crown requires having max SP greater than whatever max MP is multiplied by 10 and then plus 45. The magic crown is just the reverse of that formula. I find more value in making all my weapon users support spellcasters than concentrating in one over the other, but the option is there for characters that don't start with significant amounts of SP or MP. These weapon skill levels are tied to different weapons. Slashing skill levels increase the effectiveness of swords and greatswords. Blunt skill levels increase the effectiveness of maces, staffs, and axes. Piercing skill levels increase the effectiveness of spears and short swords. And martial arts skill levels increase the effectiveness of martial arts. All weapon skill levels also make it easier to spark stronger skills on those weapon types, so unless you know what you're doing or willing to do a lot of grinding, it's generally better to stick to using weapons that have higher skill levels on new characters. One other important thing to note is that most weapons can spark some skills that break the rules. For example, a skill may scale off of different character stats like magic instead of strength, or a skill on a slashing weapon may deal blunt damage instead of slash damage, but still be affected by the slash skill level. Weapon skills can even change the elemental field like spells do. I went on a tangent there, but weapon and magic skill levels are the battle effective equivalent of character level ups in most JRPGs. Increasing these levels also increase the battle strength of your characters, so I think it was important to explain them in depth. By the way, I'm intentionally going way deeper into the palace than I need to for this quest to pick up some treasure and unlock some future events. These events will eventually unlock one of the main dungeons that lead to the Earth Abyss Gate. The monsters down here are much more dangerous than the goblins and slimes above, which were also pretty easy to avoid. The fun of open world games is being able to do stuff like this. My party is a little stronger with Sarah in Commander mode too. I love Commander mode. It's a semi-automatic attack mode that's one of the first of its kind in a JRPG, at least when the game was originally released in 1995. When the battle starts, you can select a general strategy to follow. Your party members will usually act according to whatever weapon they are equipped with in their first weapon slot, but if they have spells, they can cast those too. Recovery items can be used from the backpack every round. At the beginning of each round, party members will recover a small amount of hit points and recover from all status ailments except petrification and poison. Formation skill points will also increment 1 point to allow for stronger formation skills if they have been learned. Commander mode also allows formations to be changed on the fly in battle. In the Whirlwind formation, I have access to the Rising Flame Spell Fusion formation skill, which uses 2 mages in the back rank to cast a very strong fire spell on a single enemy. Different formations have access to different skills, and different weapon and spell element arrangements within these formations can spark new formation skills in Commander mode. Fighting strong high-rank enemies increases the chance of sparking new formation skills, just like in regular battle mode. All the protagonists in Romancing SaGa 3 also have a hidden support level stat that secretly levels up when using Commander mode. At the max support level of 50, the party's damage can increase as much as 39% in this mode. As Sarah, I'll be using this mode periodically throughout our playthrough for a reason that will become clear towards the end of this video. Since you don't have to enter commands for 5 party members and formation skills can be strong, this mode can speed up the combat in the game. The health and status regeneration features every turn also make it possible to win harder fights like I'm doing right now. I'm showing off some of the special locations in the palace right now. South of my current position is a shortcut portal guarded by a really strong fixed encounter I'm not quite ready for yet. My goal is to check the fancy door to the north. The empty chest I checked recently with the cryptic message might unlock a side quest later, but I'm not 100% sure. Just by checking this door, I triggered an event, so now I'll backtrack all the way back up and rescue the child. Then we leave the palace. Next, I'll take a free boat ride via mules to the town of Zweig, which was the route we could have taken if we accepted Khalid instead of Thomas earlier. From talking to everyone in Zweig, we unlock the town of Kurdland and the Westos Forest, which houses an inventor and peculiar creatures. In Kurdland, we also talk to everyone to learn a girl is looking for a guy named Paul. There's also a horrific monster living in a cave outside town demanding a sacrifice. The mayor offers us a reward for taking care of the monster, but I decide to save it for later. I take the boat from Kurdland to Justerm, again speaking with everyone in town. A funky looking character offers us a job we'll definitely accept later, but for now we visit Lance to speak to everyone. In Lance, we can get a cargo delivery quest to Yarmouth we're going to do in a little while. The Astronomer's House is also a very important location where we learn about the more specific locations of the Sinistrals and the existence of powerful multi-magic spells which are sealed by the Sinistrals. We've already unlocked Mount Tafton and visited the Archfiend's Palace, but we haven't been near the other locations yet. The second important location in Lance is the home of the matriarch's descendants. The head of the family gives us the royal ring required to explore the depths of the palace behind the door we found down there. If we didn't reach that door, we would have had to go back later to do that before obtaining this ring. I'm nowhere near strong enough to handle the depths right now, but I can go down there anytime. The royal ring also makes characters immune to instant death attacks, has 5 magic defense, and provides some hit point regen on characters, so it remains a great piece of equipment for the rest of the game. Now that we got the royal ring, we do the cargo delivery quest to Yarmouth. We could simply run over to Yarmouth to quickly finish the quest, but by beating up all the thieves we can learn where their hideout is, so that's what I do. Then I simply make my way to Yarmouth to collect. Instead of exploring Yarmouth right away, I return to Lance to talk to the NPC that gave us the cargo quest. Now he'll pay us 2,000 orums to deliver cargo to Pharos, so that's exactly what I do. Then I go say hello to the thieves in their hideout I discovered. I find Paul here, who that girl in Kurdland was looking for. He is recruitable after sealing an abyss gate and shares young boy's unique weapon sparking type. Apparently, if you have a female in your party and wipe to the thieves while doing the cargo transport quest, he can join your party early, but I've never personally tested that. It's best to just go straight to the thieves leader and defeat him first, as it clears the cave of enemies and makes it easier to get all the chests. He can be pretty tough though, as only long-range or multi-target attacks can reach him when his lackeys are up front. He'll also call more when you beat them, so it might be necessary to spark some special attack skills to make the fight easier if you lack those kinds of attacks. You win the fight after the leader falls. Exploring Yarmouth for the first time is always fun. This is Robin. Wandering around the town will get you his first 2 scenes, but to see his last scene you have to enter and exit the weapon shop around the center of town and then fight some monsters. He comes in 2 flavors, fat and skinny, each with its own stats but similar unique characteristics. Both Robins have an innate skill crown lowering SP usage by 1 when using short sword skills. That Robin doesn't start with spells and has a high SP, so he can easily get an SP crown to lower all weapon skills by 1 SP, but it doesn't stack with the innate short sword crown. Skinny Robin can't get crowns, but starts with wind magic at level 10 and some wind spells. You can recruit one of them by entering the warehouse on the south side of town after seeing all the events. Just enter and re-enter until your favorite flavor of Robin appears. Also in Yarmouth at the weapon store in the center of town, it's possible to sell the royal ring for 2,500 orums. To get it back, exit out of the shop menu, then buy the fine ring from the shop for 10 orums, and it will become the royal ring that you just sold. It's a feature that was in the original game. It's useful for getting money early on to afford spells and high-end equipment. Just make sure you remember to get the ring back if you sell it, as it is the key to reach one of the Sinistrals. The royal ring can also be duped if you part with someone in your party equipped with it and then buy the fine ring here. I'll have more money than I know what to do with, so I won't be exploiting this, but it's a good option for people who are stuck in the game, so I wanted to show you. I go back to Pedona to check on my blacksmiths, and then it's time for us to explore the Westos Forest next to Zweig. My favorite character is in the mansion towards the back. She has quite an introduction, but all we need to do here is capture her pets and bring them back to her by defeating them. The other option is to sell them in Zweig, but that probably closes off her quest chain, so I'm not doing that. So back in the forest, we need to engage with the slimy orange worms on the field. I love the unique battle music that plays just for the pet fights in this quest. I would have done it earlier, but it's one of the more difficult early side quests, so I did some other ones first. The professor gives us our reward, a hot kiss, totally worth the trouble, and then she tells us about her other naughty pet, Algernon. For now, let's head back to Kurdland and accept the mayor's quest to eliminate the threat in the sacrificial cave. The mayor locks us in, intending for us to be the monster's sacrifice. At the end of this cave, we find the professor's missing pet, Algernon, and we're forced to run from it. Then we head back to the entrance, and Nina rescues us. sidequests. There are several ways to do this quest, but the best one is to go back to the professor where she'll give us the Eradicator item we need to defeat Algernon. If we revisit Curdlan to confront the mayor, we learn that he locked Nina in the cave to be sacrificed. So we head in there and use the Eradicator to identify Algernon as the creature that takes 0 damage from it. Then I have my party targeted with their strongest attacks. It's basically a damage race with a fair amount of luck involved since the bubonic plague can easily destroy my party first at my low hit point levels. Ellen barely pulled through for me, but there's no shame in doing some grinding if necessary to get enough hit points to survive longer. After a fair bit of drama, it turns out that Nina is safe, so we leave the cave. Then I give the mayor a well-deserved knuckle sandwich. Give us info is a badly translated option that asks for money, and you know how I feel about asking for money in this game. With the money I earned questing, I teach Sarah the lunar healing spell Lunar Light, which also gives her 5 MP to start using magic with to level it up. Teaching a character magic also gives them a low-level spell to use to train up the magic skill and help accumulate more max MP, but it's still a long-term effort. I like to have about 50 max MP on my characters by the end of the game. The only way to get to Vanguard in Great Ark is by ship, so I pay the hefty 1,000 Orm fee to go to Great Ark. I'll be able to travel there by world map in the future. There's a lot to do here, including a recruitable character named Herman we'll come back to later who offers us info on Black Sparrow's treasure for 100 Orms. Before I even leave the dock though, I take another boat to the town of Aceh. In Aceh there's an NPC that can convert Roots of Life to useful full HP recovering Twig of Life. The locals talk about the jackal and the fairies living in the jungle. We also learn that the fire palace housing Aonis is deep in the jungle. I buy Sarah the Feather Seal spell to give her fire element magic. Feather Seal will give whoever it is cast on invisibility, making them impossible to individually target. There's also an abandoned house we can use for a free inn. We'll be exploring the jungle a little later. Next I explore the 4 completely optional treasure caves unlocked by talking to the NPCs on the beach of Great Ark. The earlier you explore these caves, the more useful the treasure will be. These caves are also great to explore before doing the other side quests, as the encounters can make you strong enough to handle those. Herman on the docks of Great Arch lets us access a special 5th cave, but I'm saving him for later. Ellen has served us well, but we'll be replacing her, so I part ways with her in Pedona. It's time to head back to Justerm to accept the job from Ward. Ward is a very slow 2-handed sword user, but he's quite strong and has a lot of LP, making him a decent tank and counterattack user. He joins us to slay the monster near the end of the Arctic Lake. This was another quest I held back on to strengthen my party for, since the boss at the end isn't exactly a pushover. Ward and Sarah were knocked out, but the rest of the party managed to pull through in the end. As a reward, Ward is available to recruit in Justerm, and a fun quest will become available to us in the future. For now, I recruit Ward and get him set up immediately with wind and sun magic, since I'm planning on taking him to the end of the game. Because I've asked Anna about the Abyss Gates in Lance, the Show of Wonders appears in random cities, and I happen to find it in Ryblov. So we go in and check it out. There's a barf tent on the right, and we can't see much in the tent to the left. In the blue tent is a captive fairy that obviously doesn't want to be there, but we can't see anything. So we leave and immediately sleep at the inn to trigger an event. We head back to the Show of Wonders and rescue the fairy from confinement. When we head into the barf tent, a super strong enemy attacks us, letting us spark a ton of new weapon skills. This makes me glad I haven't bothered grinding at all, as the relative difference in enemy rank to my party's strength is definitely playing a part in getting so many sparks here. While it's possible to beat him, I decide to simply nope out after he wipes most of my party out, since escaping with all those cool new skills I sparked is far more important to me. It's time to say goodbye to Robin, and it's off to Aceh to explore the jungle. In these fights, I'm making sure to use magic at least once to give Ward and Sarah a chance to get max MP. Drum and bass in a JRPG, I love it. Anyways, if you're doing this blind, you'll probably get lost, but I know exactly where to go. From the jungle entrance, we go down right, up left, and then climb the tree to reach the fairies' village. The fairies are tricksters, but there's lots of fairies harps to find in their village. What we need to do is talk to Peony near the top, whom we rescued from the Show of Wonders. They'll tell us to follow the green butterfly to reach the fire fortress, and the fire fortress will be our next destination. There's a degree of randomness, but for the most part, if you follow the butterfly a few times, you'll eventually reach the fortress. I got lucky here and just had to enter and re-enter 2 areas to find it. A lot of the enemies in the palace are undead and weak to blunt attacks. Now that we've found the palace, it will be a quick travel location on our world map, so for now I leave and go back to the fairy village. Speaking to Peony after going to the fire palace unlocks them for recruitment, and you better believe we're recruiting this one. Check out those stats. 21 strength, 22 dex, and 25 speed. Makes me wonder how those clowns at the Show of Wonders were even able to catch this monster. Peony does have a deplorable 10 in stamina and a natural weakness to wind attacks though, so we will have to compensate accordingly with equipment. Peony is also a natural lance spark type with the strength, dexterity, and weapon skill levels to use swords and bows decently too. They also start with plenty of max SP and a skill crown to make sparking skills and using them a little easier. Peony will lose it when I give them magic, but it's a nice feature for a freshly recruited character. At this point, my characters have sparked many skills, but only acquired a few, so I grind out some masteries at the Fire Palace, just so I can remove them to make room to spark more. Then we head towards a brand new area east of Ryblov, the Naj Desert. For now, we head west to the Archlord's Tower and speak to everyone. Then I return to Pedona to take a ship to Vanguard. In Vanguard, we talk to everybody and learn about some feuding mages in the town of Mazos to the south. We also learn of a small town by the foot of Mount Love. There are also stories of the Vanguard being able to move, and a barkeep that acts funny when dolphins are mentioned. For now, we leave and head to northern Mazos. We learn about the sorceress Undyne, who's adept at Gembu magic, which is water. Undyne wants us to snuff out the firebrand mage volcano in the southern part of Mazos, so I accept the mission. There's some nice treasure in the tower with water elemental resistances. Then we head to the southern part of town. On the way, we see a well guarded by two wizards. We learn a bunch of corpses were thrown in that well when the Sinistrals reigned. At Volcano's palace, we get a job to relieve him of Undyne's meddling and accept it. Now we can either assassinate one of the mages and collect a reward from the other, or choose the more interesting third option, which is what we'll do later. Our next task is the business minigame. To start it, you have to have rescued Gon from the Archfiend's palace, have Thomas in your party, and then you need to visit Thomas's uncle's home in Pedona to speak with everyone. Sarah Holdings is formed, and now it's time to take over the world with capitalism. This is actually a pretty involved minigame with up to 40,000 Orum in rewards depending on how it is completed. Thomas also gets an alternate ending for finishing it. Anyways, the strategy is to purchase smaller companies first and focus on getting skills like under the table. Then we can use the companies and skills we obtain to overwhelm and purchase bigger and bigger competitors. The first stage of this minigame only requires us to collect 100 million gold in assets. After doing so, we talk to Fulbright several times for our 10,000 Orum reward and then start stage 2. To complete stage 2, we need to purchase Dofor Maritime in Yarmouth, but you can acquire the entire company if you get powerful enough. I bought everything I could find just to make the last part of the minigame easier in the future. Fulbright gives us another 10,000 Orum reward after finishing it. To even start stage 3, we'll need to seal an Abyss Gate first. Fulbright is also a recruitable character and a decent mage in the game. He'd need to accumulate a max MP of 195 to obtain a crown, and he has a Nun Spark type, so he's more or less expected to be a mage. But the 20 in Dex means that if someone else sparked the bow or short sword skills, he could use those skills effectively after leveling up the appropriate weapon levels. For the next side quest, we'll need to get our average hit points around the 250 to 300 range, so I grind out some more skill masteries in the Fire Palace while leveling up. Seismic Strike is amazing. It hits all ground-based enemies and has an earth field element attached to it. Ward also sparked a really awesome counter, Riposte. It cancels the enemy's physical attack and hits really hard. Nora also managed to do 4-digit damage after sparking Rock Splitter, another amazing skill. It took a while to master all these skills, so I took the opportunity to visit the blacksmith periodically to forge some really awesome equipment too. After doing all this, we returned to Muse's home in Pedona. She unknowingly drank some cursed medicine from the Dream Eater and is fighting him within her dream. Charles is going to enter the dream to help her, so we offer to come along. The Pedona Palace in the Dream World is an incredibly short puzzle dungeon. The enemies in here are easy to avoid. There are two awesome accessories to find in here: the extraordinarily powerful Dream Gem that nullifies sleep and has an incredible 18 magic defense on it, and the Silver Glove, which can be put on Charles to fix his stinky strength and dex to an amazing 23 and 19 respectively, turning him into an amazing character. The puzzle in this place involves entering the last room to the far right on the north side and speaking with the woman on the far right to make her disappear, then leaving the room. You may have to repeat this a few times, but when it works, you'll reach a new area when you leave the room. In the next room, you just need to do the same thing and then proceed up the stairs to find Muse. Her mere presence in your party will make the boss of this place much easier. Muse herself has very decent stats, particularly with her 25 charisma, 20 dex, and 19 intelligence. She has only 6 life points though. She also starts completely bereft of SP and MP, making her extremely customizable for crowns if you train her up in magic or weapons. Muse has the Nun Spark type, so if you use weapons with her, you'll probably want another character to spark and acquire skills for her to use. You still have to defeat the Dream Eater, but we have some things to do first. Normally the Dream Gem disappears when you complete this quest, but if you equip it on Charles and get him to lose all of his LP while it's equipped, he will take the item with him to the real world, so that's what I do. The enemies in here are annoying and can put the party to sleep, but it also provides plenty of opportunities to spark and acquire the useful sleep evasion skill. The enemies also drop Tapir's Tears, which will disappear after leaving the dream, but can be used to fully replenish the party, making this a great place to grind masteries or level Muse up if you plan to use her on a more permanent basis. Just be careful using these if you're trying to to LP kill Charles for the Dream Gem. One other important thing about the Silver Glove I forgot to mention is that it can be equipped on any non-Charles character to add an extra attack to any single-handed weapon attack or offensive skill as long as they aren't equipped with a shield or using an attack that hits all enemies. Only one shield in the game, the Archfiend's Shield, can be used with the Silver Hand. Since I won't be using Charles, I put the Silver Glove on Nora. The boss itself is much harder without Muse, so I shoved her in there as weak as she was. I also put my party into one of my favorite formations, the Tiger's Ferocity, which halves the damage my party takes as long as nobody dies and breaks the formation. It's a great formation for boss fights and can help keep your party alive if they have lower hit point totals. I basically focused on keeping her alive to end the fight early. She'll get some dialogue and the boss will be defeated. All is well back in the real world. Turns out the leader Maximus from the Divine Order gave the kids the medicine for Muse. I recruit Charles temporarily to take the Dream Gem off him, get Ellen back in my party to spark martial arts skills, and empty the 6th party slot. Then I go back to the Naj Desert and travel east this time into the Flowing Sands. There's one very challenging fixed encounter to gate saucy players who try to travel here too early, but my party is good enough to beat it in the Tiger's Ferocity formation. From here we follow a long path south through several screens to the Desert of Death. There's a path towards the eastern exit leading north that we'll explore later. For now, we take the eastern exit to reach the Great Plains. The Great Plains are a more open area. From here we travel north the screen and then follow the river east to finally reach Mwenge village. There's a bit of culture shock. We learn that the Zelnem tribe from the north is attacking the village. Jiling leads us to Bai Main Yang in the tent. Bai Main Yang calls us dunderheads for crossing the desert on foot and offers us safe passage into Huang City if we help her with some business with the Nef tribe. She grabs Ward out of my party to ask him about magic, and we get Jiling to help us deal with the Nef tribe. Jiling is hands down the best bow user in the game with a 24 in dex. She's the only non-protagonist natural bow spark type. Jiling comes equipped with a powerful sacred bow and a high bow skill level. She also started with an SP crown when I got her, but if you get to her earlier, you might have to grind SP for that crown. We head back out of town and south a few screens until we reach the Neft's cave. Having 2 bow users means I can have Jiling inherit Sarah's acquired bow skills. We can also have a bow user now if we go into commander mode too. The Zalnamites here have an annoyingly strong AoE attack that pierces through my front rank, so I take the fights more seriously. The goal in this cave is to defeat the unmoving Zalnems in the cave. After that, we can make it to the Neft tribe's leader on the west side who tells us the Archfiends wreaked havoc in the settlements here in the past. He says the tribe will work with the people here and lets us know the Zalnams came from far to the north. We return back to Mwenge village to report to Bai Main Yang. She tells us to go to Huang City where we're immediately arrested by Yang Fan. Bai Main Yang breaks us out and tells us exactly where the Zalnem haunt is. The dialogue between Bai Main Yang and Yang Fan tells us Huang City is having problems of its own. If you have 3 or fewer party members, both Bai Main Yang and Yang Fan will temporarily join your party. Bai has 23 intelligence, but she only has a 13 in speed. She has unremovable wind magic, a non-spark type, and 13 life points, which makes her a surprisingly good tank for a mage, especially with certain magic spell combinations or even an Archfiend's Shield. Yang Fan has 23 intelligence and 21 speed, making him a really fast magic user. His will and charisma are also high, so he can be effective with all spells. However, he can't get a crown due to his point totals. He has a special spear spark type like Charl, letting him spark a variety of skills on many weapons, but with a 15 in dex and a 10 in strength and constitution, you'll probably want to keep him on magic duty. Bai Main Yang can be recruited after handling the Zelnems, but Yang Fan can't be more permanently recruited until 4 Abyss gates have closed. Because of this, he becomes available far too late to ever be of use to me personally. Someday I'd like to use him in a playthrough though. The stores in Huang City are the big reason I took the trip to the desert. This place sells the 2 best celestial spells in the game, Shadow Servant and Parhelion, for 9,999 gold each, which I can afford thanks to the business minigame. Shadow Servant is lunar magic that creates a body double of the caster, which doubles actions taken in battle and can absorb an enemy's physical attack. Parhelion is solar magic that gives the caster a 25% chance to nullify all damage they would normally take. If you use the Royal Ring trick to make money, you can fit your entire party with these spells later. They also sell the extremely powerful but heavy Bujin armor. The Ascetics robe also boasts nice defense and weighs nothing. Endgame I tend to prefer resistances and stat boosts to pure defense, but these are great pieces of armor for the mid game or even just to put on characters that die too much. Next we head north a few screens on the field to reach the Zelnem's haunt. This place is loaded with enemies and caves with treasure. In the depths we find the boss. I changed back to Tiger's Ferocity formation as this is an annoying endurance fight. Powerful ranged attacks are recommended as it summons Zelnems to shield it from close range attacks, and only by finishing the boss can we finish the fight. I had Sarah go invisible and heal the party to keep the formation alive while my other party members attacked. We eventually prevail and receive the Archfiend's armor. The Archfiend's armor has extremely high defense values and excellent immunities, but it doubles the cost of all skills and magic on the user. It's fantastic for challenging late game in-game boss fights. We are also now able to go to the world map now, but we have a few more things to do here. First, we talk to all the villagers in Mwenge to learn about a town populated by elephants. Then we go to visit that town, Rashkuta. The villagers tell us about how they were cursed to be elephants by the Archfiend years ago. One of the elephants tells us a story about finding an abandoned baby boy alongside the Rotten Sea 15 years ago and how he grew up to be strong. But he was taken by a monster from the castle in the Rotten Sea. The elephant's brother tried to save the boy, but he fell into a coma after returning and is still sleeping. Young boy actually has a bit of a story here if you bring him to the elephant's brother in the next room. It's kind of implied that young boy was the baby referred to in this story. More importantly though, this unlocks the storyteller elephant, Rook, for recruitment. Rook has an incredible 36 life points and 26 constitution, which easily makes him the best tank in the game. In addition to that, he can use two-handed swords like they are one-handed, letting him use a shield too. With 19 in strength, he does decent damage. While he has some armor limitations, he can get a skill crown or get outfitted with magic to make him an even better tank. I won't be using him in this playthrough, but he's still one of my favorite characters in the game. We unlock the deserted castle in the Rotten Sea from talking to all the elephants, which was my main purpose for coming here. Next is a loot run into the Rotten Sea ruins, which is loaded with some nice challenging enemies for powering up. We come out with some nice items like the Falcon Wind Axe I'll be putting on someone soon. The last chest has an awesome buckler guided by the Dragon Lord, who is definitely meant to be challenged in the late game. Of course, I get destroyed, so we'll come back for it later. And finally, we're ready to go north at the end of the Death Desert to reach the Crystal Runes. There's a treasure room with some dangerous and unrewarding enemies I avoid. The Star Mail, Morax Leather, and Titan Suit are interesting armors. The Titan Suit in particular is fantastic for slow, tanky characters despite its heavy weight. There's also 3,000 gold lying around. After looting everything, I leave and visit Vanguard. We get a scene from resting at the inn as some people are murdered. After talking to the villagers in Vanguard, we rest again at the inn. This time, we get attacked by the murderous monsters. Afterwards, we talk to the mayor, who is in a panic over Fornius. Sarah suggests getting the Vanguard moving again, but even the mayor doesn't know how. We leave his room and talk to him again to reach the cave entrance leading to Vanguard's control room. There's not much to loot here, and it's much easier to pick up later when the monsters are gone, so I make my way to the control room. In the control room, we turn on the system, but nothing else happens, so we return to the mayor. We point out to the mayor that the dolphin statue in his photo was missing. Now we need to get it back, so we go to the pub and chat with the owner. The owner sold the statue to the Doughfloor group in Yarmouth to earn the money to support his family. The merchant in Yarmouth makes us purchase something before telling us the pirate Black Sparrow stole the statue. We have to go to Great Ark and talk to Herman to go into his special treasure cave, but before that I feel strong enough to finish up the business in Mazos now. So back in Mazos, I talk to the guards of Dead Man's Well and go into it. There's a cursed Sanguinator sword to the left. To the right is a longer path leading to a split with treasure to the south and a path to the west that takes us to the Deathmaster. In the Rising Phoenix formation with a strengthened party, there wasn't much to worry about here. My party just focused on him with ranged attacks and we eventually prevailed, winning the prize of the Archfiend's shield. This shield gives us a 25% chance of completely evading damage on the equipped character, like the Parhelion spell, but their skills and magic cost double. Since it's a magic shield, it can also be used with two-handed weapons. It's great for challenging boss fights. When we leave the well, Undyne and Volcano confront us with great fury. In fact, they're so angry they forgot about killing each other and target our party instead. My strategy was to cast the Wall of Fire spell every round, giving my party some immunity to water and fire magic. Then I focused on Undyne and then Volcano, who only have 3,300 hit points. After the fight, Sarah chastises the stinky adults and we finally complete this side quest. Doing it like this, both mages are alive, we get the Archfiend's shield, Undyne is available to be recruited, and most importantly, we can get help piloting the Vanguard from Undyne's mages. We can also finally grab the fire-resistant Ignis leather and strong ring of fending accessory from Volcano's abode. In Great Arch, Herman offers to lead us to the dolphin statue himself. Before we talk about Herman, I'll talk about Undyne. Undyne is a powerful water mage, but she actually has an innate Byakko, or earth magic crown that doesn't stack with a natural magic crown, so it's probably best to have her forget Genbu magic and learn earth magic. This funny glitch actually makes her a really strong damage dealer with the hypergravity spell. She has a very high 24 intelligence, a respectable 16 speed, and a surprisingly high 20 dex, so she could make a decent bow or short sword user if someone else acquired the skills for her. She has the Nun Spark type. Herman has even lower life points than Peony at 4, and a stinky 14 in strength, making him a poor damage dealer. He does have a 16 in magic, 12 in wind magic magic level and 24 in willpower though, so he can function as a mage. He also has a natural axe spark type. Despite his low stats, I'll be traveling with him for reasons that will be clear later. To recruit Herman, you have to make sure not to complete the treasure cave until you've triggered the dolphin statue events in Vanguard and Yarmouth before talking to Herman. The treasure cave is big, and there are enemies everywhere, but Herman makes an excellent guide, and true to the cave's name, there are some nice treasures to find here that can actually be equipped on Herman. The bosses won't attack until one of them dies, so a nice trick is to weaken all of them before killing one of them. At the end of the fight, we snag the dolphin statue and make our way back to Vanguard's control room. With the help of Mazo's wizards, the Vanguard starts moving and we make our way to the island at the end of the world. I should mention I replaced Nora with Herman and had him inherit her weapons and skills. Soon I'll be replacing Ellen with my last party member, and I'll have the team I'll take with me to the end of the game. At World's End is a village of lobster people. They immediately tell us where Fornius is, and I could go right now, but I'd rather try to save this island from the water dragon that Fornius sent to silence them from divulging his location. So we enter the cave. It's fairly straightforward, but there is a very important hidden passage I'll get to later. For now, I make my way to the end of the cave, looting what I find. In the passage before the cave's end is a special encounter with a dangerous water slug enemy symbol several levels higher than normal, which I grind for a bit in commander mode to spark some powerful skills for the upcoming challenges. In the first fight alone, Peony sparks dual dragons and triple shot with the spear. Dual dragons penetrates the front to the back rank and does a lot of damage. Ellen also sparks spatial persona, which looks like shadow magic from Chrono Trigger. Ward sparks the incorporeal stance skill. Herman sparks dimensional break off the axe, which can instantly kill all enemies in an encounter. Ward sparks gravediggers, which is a strong AoE attack but won't hit flying monsters. Peony sparks spiral charge. Ellen sparks pressure point, and then I have to nope out since Herman is at his last life point. After I recover, I return to the waterfall and enter a hidden cave to reach the dragon boss harassing the lobsters. Commander mode didn't help me much, but Peony did spark the fantastic hit-all weapon skill Great Swing with the lance before I made a tactical retreat to recover and regroup. I came back in Tiger's Ferocity formation outside of commander mode to better deal with its attacks. The water field adds a regen effect to the dragon, so I cast Wall of Fire and use dual dragons to try to cancel it. The fight barely ends in victory, which also tells me I'm not ready for Fornius yet. So I go back and grind the monster in the cave for more strength and sparks. Ellen sparks the awesome Punishing Palm skill which hits all enemies. Ward also sparks Bull Rush, and after Ellen acquires all the skills she sparked, I replace her with Boston the martial arts lobster, who became available to recruit after I defeated the water dragon in the cave. Boston is a martial arts spark type with a decent level of Gembu or water magic as well as a high magic stat of 21, making him a great healer and an excellent water magician. He has a high speed stat and a more average strength stat at 16. His dex is only 13, which adversely affects accuracy a bit. However, his 19 in stamina helps his martial arts skills a bit. He wears a natural lobster armor that gives him a weakness to blunt attacks, but also a 25 in defense and a 5 in magical defense. My favorite thing about him is his pincer attack though, that replaces the martial artist's punch command and hits like a freight train at high levels, even with his 16 in strength. I grind Boston up a bit to catch up to the rest of my party. He ends up sparking Niagara Buster, a really strong throw. With most of my party over skill level 20 in their primary damage skills, I finally decide to take the subnautical trip to Fornius' Undersea Palace to challenge our first Sinistro with my new party. The Undersea Palace is a lengthy dungeon worth exploring thoroughly. The meteorite shard is used to blacksmith the Great Kree Knife accessory, which grants the wearer excellent status resistances. You can also find the water-resistant Gembu armor and fish scales in chests, which are great to wear against Fornius for water resistance. All the Sinistral domains have a chest that will teach you powerful commander mode multi-magic too. This one teaches Tempest, which can instantly kill enemies. It requires party members to be in the power raised formation with moon, sun, and water magic users at specific positions within the formation to make the magic available. The monsters in the dungeon are nothing compared to the strong encounter at the end of the world, so I handle them in commander mode. Fornius, however, requires some special preparation. I leave commander mode by replacing Herman with Sarah, enter the ever-useful Tiger's Ferocity formation to have all damage, put healing items on my character's empty slots, and make sure my party has water resistance, prioritizing my healers. As one of the strongest enemies in the game, Fornius is excellent for sparking skills. Although you can't retreat from him, losing to him will not end your game. So if you spark something amazing, it's better to just try again later than to load a save. Fornius attacks multiple times per round and will regenerate 1,000 hit points per turn as long as the water field is active, so deactivating the water field and dealing far more than 1,000 damage every round is a goal. Even with water resistance on your party, he does have several powerful physical attacks like Headbutt that can hit the entire party, so defensive spells like Parhelion are useful. Jilin ends up sparking Arrow Barrage. I was able to keep Tiger's ferocity up for half the fight until he nailed Peony with his first Maelstrom. In any Romancing SaGa game, you usually want to make sure your healers are never targeting themselves with heals so that if they die, another healer will revive them on their heal. Fornius' Maelstrom hits hard for water damage to the entire party, and while my Firewall and water resistances prevent the damage, it doesn't prevent the Maelstrom's instant death effect that hits Ward here. Fornius is always a really brutal fight, and all my healers died at the end or ran out of MP, but the final push of offense at the end was just enough to pull off a victory on my first try. Sarah seals the Abyss Gate, strikes the Sarah pose, and we've now unlocked some new quests. Our first stop after beating a Sinistral is Lance. Anna can now teach us the Hasten Time Gembu spell to make sure your party moves first in battle at the cost of all the caster's MP. Anna can also show us the proper formations and magic user setup for any multi-magics we've learned in the Sinistral dungeon. Next we talk to the Matriarch's relative in Lance and open up the Matriarch's Mausoleum trials accessible just west in Lance. Khalid is always available to recruit here if you want him. By beating Fornius, Herman got his groove back, and it turns out he's the famous pirate Black Sparrow. He now most notably has 12 life points and 19 strength. He also has higher stamina and speed, making him a very balanced party member capable of much better offense with the axe. The Trial of Royalty lets us choose the longer, safer path or the shortcut with more danger. Of course, I take the shortcut, and our first encounter is the Red Dragon, which cripples my party with its first action. The second enemy is a gigantic status ailment wielding flower, and the third enemy is a strong physical attack using giant, nothing I can't handle after dealing with Fornius. The reward is a Matriarch's Helm with 8 in defense and magic defense, as well as blunt resistance and resistance to dark and mind status ailments. Next is the Trial of Hunters, which is easy to do with Jilin in the party if she has a decently leveled bow skill. It requires a bow user to hit a target enemy with the bow to proceed, so raising dex can work for other bow users. The reward is a nice Fairy's Bow, which has a 30 attack power and only weighs 1. Last is the Trial of Hardship, which begins with a straight up fight. Blunt attacks like those on the axe or mace are highly effective on undead. Boston sparked reverse slam here and ended the fight quick. Next is a Battle of Charm, which is extremely dangerous if they charm party members that can hit all targets with powerful attacks, like Peony. Just equip Kree Knife and other stat resistant items on those characters. You get Heartache for winning, which is cute. After going through a short maze, we get the Matriarch's Boots, which offers 7 in defense and magic defense. They also weigh a hefty 5 units, but grant stun immunity and a random chance to move first, which can be useful on already really slow characters like Ward. We're done with the trials, so let's go relax in Zweig. Brrr. Oh no, we got isekai'd by Carcoon. But perhaps we should pay our good friend the professor a visit in her forest. And we got ran over again. At least we know we're on the right track. She's not in her usual spot, so we enter her secret room and I don't even, but I'm going to try. So she was hired by the Duke of Zweig to build a super deluxe final romancing dragon machine, but it has a screw loose, so it became the hyper gold luxury fully automatic final virtual romancing exciting dragon machine X. And it ran over us twice. Of course, I'll try to cheer her up, and she takes the inch and extra mile. She has a bit of Chunibyo syndrome. It's a Japanese idiom that would take me too long to explain in English. Just look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about. Anyways, Sarah Carson has had enough, so the professor gets right to the point. We need to use her prototype vehicle in the back to destroy the hyper gold luxury fully automatic final virtual romancing exciting dragon machine X. Thus begins one of my favorite side quests in any video game. You haven't lived life in a JRPG until you've wrestling thrown a moving vehicle, and seeing a lobster Niagara buster a car is on a whole other level. Just ask anybody who has suplexed a Phantom Train in Final Fantasy VI. Anyways, you can destroy the parts of the vehicle individually. Your vehicle can also attack all parts at once until it's destroyed. The quest ends abruptly, but the professor does reward us with a sultry kiss, so it was worth it in the end. Now we go back to Pedona because it's time to investigate Maximus and the Divine Order for the poisoning of Muse. Black calls out Maximus for being the pirate Jackal, and people ask to see his arm, which would have an identifying tattoo if it were true. Jackal runs and leaves demons behind for everyone else to deal with. We pursue him through his underground base. Since the passages are narrow, we'll be doing a lot of fighting. There's a hidden room past the second stairway down, housing a useful witch eye and a Stardust robe in the room revealed by checking the mirror. At the end of the passageway is a fixed encounter of tougher enemies, but nothing that will stop my party. As we leave the passage, people tell us the Divine Order left this hole and headed toward the port. The person at the port tells us Maximus went to Ryblov, but he actually went to the Divine Tower in the desert. At the Divine Tower, we learn only members can go in the tower. The merchants south of the tower will give us robes disguised as members of the Order so we can enter the tower. If Khalid is in your party, he'll refuse to wear the robes of people who destroyed his homeland, but he'll be okay with bribing the guard at the entrance for 10,000 orums for entry. We can familiarize ourselves with the layout of the tower as we climb the 20 floors without having to deal with encounters. When we get near the top, we ask the Divine Order's leader Tiberius where Maximus is. As if on cue, Maximus attacks the tower with monsters and declares he'll take all the Matriarch's relics. Tiberius can be recruited here. He's a decent non-Spart type mage with 23 intelligence and 20 will. But if your party's levels are too high when you reach him, it will be impossible for Tiberius to get a magic crown. We have to make our way up to the top of the tower to fight a series of increasingly challenging fights ending with a red dragon, which is why I'm in Tiger's Ferocity formation here. Now we climb back down to talk to Tiberius again. The elevators have been disabled, so we need to find the switch, which happens to be near the bottom of the tower. Once we make it back down to the bottom, the tower is filled with monsters. They're pretty easy to avoid, but it can make obtaining all the treasures more annoying. The best treasures in here are the Staff of Vivacity and the Runic Staff. As we reach the elevator switch and climb the tower, we'll lose random members of our party to various events. By the time we reach Maximus, we're confronting him alone with Sarah. Every few rounds, a new party member will rejoin us with all their skill and magic points back. Other than that, it's best to just use the most powerful attacks to try to beat him quickly before he summons his friends. For going through all that trouble, we get the Matriarch's relics, the Staff of Glory, Masquerade, Matriarch's Spear, Treonis Blade, and Archfiend's Axe. These are all amazing and useful weapons up to the end of the game. After completing this quest, it's a good time to talk to Fulbright to begin the third and final part of the business minigame. Completing this minigame after closing 4 Abyss Gates will yield a 20,000 Orum reward. However, you can't start the third part of this minigame if you've already closed all the gates, which is why I mentioned this now. Speaking to an old lady in the home on the southwest side of Stanley unlocks the old temple runes for exploration since we defeated the thieves at the beginning of the game. We'll explore those runes later though because I'm hungry for blood, Colossus's blood, and we already know he's under the Archfiend's Palace thanks to Anna. I defeat the fixed encounter at the bottom of the Archfiend's Palace to unlock a shortcut down here. Then I make my way back to the door we found at the beginning of the game, but this time the Royal Ring unlocks it and we enter a whole new area. I love how this dungeon remixes the Archfiend Palace theme. This place looks as cool as it sounds too. The enemies here aren't difficult, but they love to steal life points and inflict extremely dangerous status ailments like Charm, which can quickly wear out your party. So I make sure to have at least 1 barrier stone on me to completely recover before fighting Colossus. Like the Undersea Palace, it's worth exploring thoroughly for some great treasures and nothing good is too hidden. It's a very patterned dungeon. The best treasures are probably the 3 meteorite shards, Byakko armor, fish scale, and the light wall multi-magic spell. Some of the treasures are guarded by stronger fixed encounters. Light Wall will halve the damage your party takes for the remainder of the round, and then push forward to damage enemies on the front row. It requires the trianchor formation with Sun, Moon, and Earth magic users placed in specific positions to cast. At the end, we encounter our second Sinistral Colossus. He's a bruiser with a lot of nasty physical attacks. He also regenerates off an Earth field, so it's important to make sure that doesn't happen. My party is much stronger since fighting Fornius, with Matriarch equipment and top-tier support spells like Parhelion and Shadow Servant. So the fight wasn't too difficult for me in Tiger's Ferocity. Strong blunt damage skills like Dynamic Hit do a lot of damage. Physical attack evasion skills and counter skills in a formation drawing aggro to one character can be useful against him, even though I didn't bother with them. Black finishes him off with a Dynamic Hit. Sarah seals the Earth's Sinistral Gate and does her Sarah pose. We have more side quests to do, but first we visit Anna and Lance to teach the Earth magic we unlocked from defeated Colossus, Super Gravity to Jilin. This is the strongest single target non-commander mode spell in the game. We enter the Zweig tournament, which pits our team against a bunch of enemy teams in one-on-one battles until all members of either team are spent. Peony just destroys everything, and if anybody manages to overcome Peony, my other team members just clean up. As a reward, the Duke of Zweig gives us the quest for the Holy Grail, which requires us to go on a very dangerous adventure through Leonid's castle, which we're not quite ready for yet, but it's unlocked for when we are ready. Instead, I decide to explore the temple runes. The path is straightforward, and there are a few nice treasures like the Staff of Vivacity. There's a fixed encounter that might be the Ashura, the best monster in the game for sparking new skills if your party level is high enough. I take full advantage with the intention of sparking new skills, retreating and repeating the process. Boston sparks Evil Crush. Peony sparks the extremely powerful Triumvirate. Ward sparks Net Evade, which is one of the most useful evades in the game. Ward also sparks Mirage Blade for one-handed swords, which hits all enemies for damage that scales well with sword skill levels. Then he sparks Riptide, and finally Headwind Rush before the game stops pitting me up against Ashuras. At the end of the cave, we get the choice to offer a prayer. The chest in the Archfiend's Palace at the beginning of the game tells us to offer a prayer of death, so That's what I do when we end up fighting the boss. It's very damage resistant, but otherwise isn't too threatening. For winning, we get the Death Shard, which is used to craft some interesting equipment at the blacksmith that turns equipping party members undead. We go back to Anna and Lance, and she tells us the Aurora should appear at night. When we ask about the serum, she tells us a story that unlocks the remaster's unique dungeon, which is great for fleshing out the game's story and grinding to get strong enough for the endgame. Now it's time to trigger one of the more interesting quests in this game by zooming the map out and waiting for the Aurora. If we didn't do the quest for Ward earlier or accepted too much money from quests, then this quest may not trigger. When we see the shooting stars, the Aurora Road unlocks on the map and we visit it. Then we enter Frostburg, a village of snowmen. When we reach this room and talk to the snowman by the eastern wall, Flurry blows his cover and offers to join our party. The rest of the snowmen can talk too. Apparently Flurry traveled with the matriarch 300 years ago. Flurry is a weird character. He has extremely high stamina and will, but lower damage stats, with Dex being the highlight at a middling 17. He's also a martial arts spark type with water magic. The snowmen talk about the Everfrost crystal that allows them to survive the sun from the outside world. Our next quest will be to obtain this crystal, so we head through the passage to the Ice Galaxy to retrieve it. The enemies are easy to avoid, and we can simply grab the Everfrost crystal here with little trouble. Continuing on, we have the option to fight the Ice Dragon Lord, which has a 2% chance of dropping the best spear in the game, the Dragon Spear. The Dragon Lord is very strong, but after fighting 2 Sinistrals, my party manages a victory. Beyond the Dragon Lord is the Everfrost Blade, a powerful 2-handed sword that can spark a unique ice skill that hits all enemies for ice damage depending on the user's sword skill and intelligence. The sword also grants the user an ice barrier that makes them immune to cold and counters close-range physical attacks with a magical ice attack. The counter will also cancel the user's turn though if they haven't acted yet. When we leave the village, we have the option of housing the Everfrost crystal in Flurry's body so he can leave, so we do so. This gives Flurry immunity to fire and water attacks. We go directly to the Fire Palace next to hunt down our 3rd Sinistral Ionis. The Fire Palace seems shorter and easier than most of the other Sinistral dungeons, but the treasures are still nice. Ignis Leather, the Nightingale Short Sword, Shucho Armor, and the Crimson Flare Fusion multi-magic spell are notable. The Shucho Armor offers protection from fire, but make the equipped character fly, which also makes them weak to gale attacks. Crimson Flare hits a single enemy for a large amount of damage. It requires the party to be in power raised formation with Moon, Sun, and Fire users placed in specific positions within the formation. There's a powerful fixed encounter here with a Pyro Hydra to prevent weaker parties from encountering the Sinistral too early, but my current party destroys it. Toward the back of the palace, we find the Abyss Gate and encounter the Sinistral Ionis. Now I could fight Ionis the normal way, or I could fight Ionis the unique but kind of evil way. I decide to go the unique route. My party wipes, except Flurry, who sacrifices himself to defeat the Sinistral. The Serapos is looking a little different after this one. Back in Lance, we can now learn the awesome Revive spell, which will automatically completely recover a character's health when they lose all hit points. The character will still lose an LP though. At the bar in Padona, we learn that the Sinistral Bunet is attacking Loan. At Loan, we visit Mikhail's castle and sit on his throne. Julian is here for recruitment if we wanted him. Mikhail gives you an official mission to fight Bunet on Mount Tafton. Before we head to Mount Tafton, I visit Tinyville north of Vanguard, a location that was obviously designed to be very forgettable. The bartender tells us about the dragon Gwaine that lives on Mount Louv, unlocking the location for us. Minstrel has an interesting story to tell us here, about how Bunet considered herself the ruler of the skies and refused to meet the matriarch's challenge below. So the matriarch sought out the dragon Dora on Mount Louv, and mounted Dora to confront and ultimately defeat Bunet in the skies. A bit of a hint about the more interesting way to fight Bunet than simply climbing Mount Tafton. The story continues with Dora claiming the skies, plundering and pillaging human settlements, so the matriarch had to ultimately slay her. Now we have the option of climbing Mount Louv, and we will, but first we'll do a treasure run through Mount Tafton. Following the path and running across the gaps will ultimately reach a foggy area after which we get to Bunet's lair. There are life point sucking traps everywhere and bones to check for items. The most valuable treasure is the Soryu armor that's dropped by the fixed encounter right before Bunet's Abyss Gate. The armor offers 20 in physical and magical defense, as well as immunity to sound wave attacks at a weight of 5. We also find the Galaxy multi-magic spell, which damages all enemies. It requires moon, sun, and wind magic users in special positions in the Gembu formation. I could just go into Bunet's lair to fight her, but we're going to climb Mount Louv instead. After a few screens, we reach Gwaine's den. There's a ring of fending and a barrier stone to find, but the real treasure here is Gwaine. Even with my low intelligence members of my party casting it, the Galactic Rift spell does seem to do a respectable amount of damage to all enemies. Before speaking with Gwaine, I make sure Sarah has the Dream Gem equipped, making herself immune to sleep attacks. We have the option to talk to him, and we learn that we've actually been fighting the weaker shadows of the Sinistrals that won't have their full power unless they get their hands on the destined child, the survivor of the most recent death eclipse. This would also spell disaster, so Sarah asks Gwaine for help defeating Bunei. What follows is one of the most iconic boss fights ever against the shadow of Sinistral Bunei. Sarah is so decked out with self-healing spells, revive, and sleep immunities, so the fight isn't too hard for me. Gwaine also gets to attack and is immortal in the battle. Bunei does get stronger as she spawns heads after taking damage, but with Gwaine it's very manageable. Since this is the 4th Abyss Gate, we get a scene with young boy trying to be a hero and entering the Abyss Gate in an attempt to save Sarah, suggesting he's the child of destiny. But seeing as how Sarah is the same age, it's still unclear. We get a series of scenes and learn there's a 5th Abyss Gate near Xuan in the east. Sarah's determined to save young boy, and she gets a vision showing her where to go. We also see the true forms of the 4 Sinistrals we fought, and a 5th bad guy giving them instructions to target Huang Castle. We pick up the extremely useful Dragon's Descent wind spell from Anna and Lance, letting the user lose 1 LP when taking a hit instead of hit points. This eliminates the need to heal and turns high LP characters into even better damage tanks. The spell also makes all skills and spells cost 0 points to use. Back at the bar in Padona, we learn our friend Gwaine has been a naughty dragon and we can see his work over at Tinyville. We could technically let it slide, but I fight Gwaine for the nice reward at the end, the dragon's scale. It's one of the best crafting items for the blacksmith. The scene that plays afterwards is pretty sad. The dragon claims it died on its own terms, and tells us our strength rivals that of the matriarch herself, before being crushed under rocks from the fight. Then we finally explore the remaster exclusive dungeon, Phantom Maze. There's story events in here for Khalid, the Sinon settlers Tatiana, and young boy if they're in your party. Otherwise, you will learn more about their circumstances. There are also some very powerful accessories to find guarded by bosses at the end of all the sections. It's possible to grind the unique enemies for very nice items for blacksmithing here too. The section bosses drop the Princess's Necklace for Khalid, the Mage Ring that halves MP costs and gives +5 to the magic stat, the Expert Ring that halves the cost of skills and gives +5 dex, and another Death Shard. We'll come back later for the final boss of this place. Now it's finally time to pay the vampire Leonid a visit in Podorui. Sarah asks Leonid about the Holy Grail. Leonid tells Sarah to meet him in his quarters far beneath the castle for the Holy Grail, and disappears with some grand laughter. Of course, he'll make us play some Castlevania for it. These enemies wiped me easily before, but it's a different story now. Things seem fairly standard until we leave the first room. This definitely sounds like Kenji Ito's later works in Saga Frontier. There are plenty of awesome treasures in here, but a few of them aren't meant for your human characters to use. There's a runic staff and a dragon scale lying around among many other things. The Twilight Robe is actually a trap item that's too good to be true. Most of the enemies in here are undead and weak to blunt attacks from axes or maces. One of the strongest fixed encounters in the game will greet you near the end, Yami, who regenerates in the Abyss magic field. He also uses Plasma Net instant death attacks and annoying all-target status ailments, so Kree knives are highly recommended to protect status. After Yami, the rest of the castle is smooth sailing, and Leonid will give us the Holy Grail at the bottom before whisking us back to the throne room. We can actually recruit Leonid into our party since we have the Holy Grail now, but my party is set in stone. Fun fact, Leonid was actually character designer Tomomi Kobayashi's favorite character design. I think he looks pretty cool. Leonid is probably the game's most unique character. He's undead, so he can't heal from regular heal magic. However, he can make full use of the Blacksmith Forged Undead Ring and Mortus Bow. His powerful Twilight Robe has a natural weakness to heat, but he regenerates every turn and has a natural immunity to most status ailments. He also comes with his own special Abyss magic that he can use to heal himself. However, he can't use any other magic. He's a short sword spark type with a deplorable 13 in dex, but he has a 19 in strength, 21 speed, a massive 25 intelligence, and an astounding 27 in charisma to charm the pants off everyone with Abyss magic. I've never used him myself, but he seems like a great candidate for the Everfrost Blade if someone else were to acquire the two-handed sword skills for him. As Leonid has no life points, he'll disappear when killed in battle, but immediately return to the party after a battle. The Holy Grail can be equipped in any character's hand slot to give them 1 SP regeneration per turn. It's time to tie up some loose ends. First we go back to the Rotten Ruins to challenge the nasty poison dragon guarding the Wilgard Buckler. I go into the fight in the Rising Phoenix formation instead of Tiger's Ferocity, because for some reason the dragon seems to use its ultimate poison attack less in this formation. It's still a fierce battle and I need to use my powerful support spells, but we pull through with everyone still alive and get a fantastic buckler capable of evading most attacks at a nice percentage. Next, we make our way to the end of the Phantom Maze to fight what I believe to be about as strong as the super version of the final boss in difficulty, Yama. I probably should have grinded for this fight, but Black Shadow Servanted and Dragon Godding was doubling up on dynamic hits, doing 90% of the damage throughout this entire fight with blunt damage. Peony spent most of the time attacking my other party members thanks to bad status, and Sarah was mostly my dedicated healer, with Boston contributing to heals every once in a while. Ward did some excellent tanking and tacked on some extra damage when he could. It was a long and brutal endurance fight, with Ward and Black at only 3 LP at the end of the fight, but we pulled through and won. After beating Yama, we see a scene with Julian, Ellen, and baby Sarah where Julian's little sister is being born as the death eclipse occurs. His sister subsequently dies, and Sarah feels a sense of guilt for being the survivor. This scene has added dialogue if you have Thomas and the rest of the characters involved in your party. We also got the Master Ring accessory for winning, which increases Dex 5 points and makes it easier to acquire sparked skills, which is important because I'm about to do a lot of sparking off of the challenging enemies in the last section of the Phantom Maze. What you're seeing right now are the fruits of 10 hours of sparking skills. Most of these skills I'll probably never use again, but there are a few really awesome ones worth noting. Shadow Buster has a chance of instantly killing the enemy. A lot of these skills spark only off of specific weapons, like Peony's Medicate here. Pion of Victory sparked off the Matriarch Spear raises stats on my entire party depending on the user's spear level, but disables fleeing. It's an excellent skill for the final boss. Millionaire on the bow absolutely melts mob encounters with huge damage to all enemies. Dimensional Slash has a chance of killing all enemies, but I've had very poor luck with it. Skydrive debuffs the target a massive 10 Constitution on use. Plasma Shot is Bolt Element and may paralyze the enemy. Shenlong Fire Fist is final boss class single target damage for martial arts. Scattered Petals on the two-handed sword is final boss class single target damage. Divine Lancer debuffs the target's defensive stats, and is fantastic to use before opening up with stronger spear skills. Disarm actually parries the enemy's attack, steals their weapon, and counterattacks them with it. If the character has an empty weapon slot, the enemy's weapon will appear in that slot on the status menu. This Ashura unfortunately didn't have a weapon, so we just got the parry. Sparking Supernova buffs the Trionis Blade up to 60 attack power, which is massive for a one-handed sword. Backstab has a chance of instantly killing the target. Tiger Break applies a very strong strength and constitution buff on the user. It's also going to hit really hard when I put it on Boston. Yo-Yo is an axe repeater skill that throws more axes at higher blunt skill level thresholds. Deadly Spin also hits extra hard at high skill levels. Reverse Orbit is super strong. It looks a lot like Sabin's Bum Rush from Final Fantasy VI. I don't know if it's still bugged, but in the original Romancing SaGa 3, the repeater skills like Yo-Yo could do a lot more damage than they should do under certain conditions. In Romancing SaGa 2, Yo-Yo is probably the strongest weapon skill in the game. Stardust has a huge power modifier and might paralyze the target. Even Sarah with no skill levels in spears did 500 damage when she sparked this skill. Fairy is going to hit even harder with it. Arctic Rush is a unique skill on the Everfrost Blade that hits all enemies. The skills don't tell you anything about their effects in-game, and the game itself also doesn't have tutorials or an in-game manual, so I'm getting a lot of this information from a guide. I also grinded out some formation texts in Commander mode. These texts look awesome and hit for stupidly large amounts of damage. Marvelous Cannon and Shivan Triangle are the most notable, but Guan Yin gets points for looking freaking awesome. I rarely see these kinds of numbers in this game. It probably helps that the characters involved in using Shivan Triangle are all very high level in their weapon skill levels. I will be playing the rest of the game in Triangle Formation in Commander mode. I want Sarah's Commander level to be really high, and I want Jilin's bow skill levels to catch up to Sarah's too. The most important thing to do before going to the endgame is to make a save on a separate file, because once you go to the endgame, you cannot go back to the world map. Most of my characters at this point are at skill levels in the high 30s or low 40s on their dominant weapons, with magic levels in the low 20s. This is far stronger than anybody would need to beat this game normally. But I'm planning on challenging myself at the very end. Now we go to Xuan and ask Bai Mei Yang about the Abyss Gate nearby. She tells us that the Abyss Gate is in Huang. Yang gets a message to stop the leader Cao Gao, which means we go to Huang. In the meantime, Yan leads Xuan's forces in a diversionary attack against Huang. Fortunately, we don't have to win this, and I'm strong enough not to need to win it anyways. The game leaves us right in front of a red dragon, and we begin our long trek up to the top of the castle. There are a lot of strong fixed encounters on the way, and some neat treasure in here. My party is armed to the teeth, but the Staff of Vivacity, Divine Boots, Dual Master, and Cordu Armor are all great pieces of equipment. In a really cool set piece at the top of the castle that brings back fond memories of the ninja chapter from Live Alive, we fight the Abyss Naga. To put it politely, this thing is no Sinistral, and my party simply levels it. While we're on the topic of leveling bosses, I just have to say this playthrough has made me a big fan of Commander mode. SaGa and his friend fall off the castle, and Sarah takes a drop down to the Abyss Gate. We're not sealing this gate though, we're going to enter it. And this is the final area of the game. There is full recovery below us if we need it. Now to make this easier for ourselves, we should explore the 4 non-central paths first to fight the 4 true Sinistrals and weaken the final boss. But I did mention I was far stronger than I needed to be to complete the game, and I want to challenge myself, so we're going straight for the unweakened final boss, the True Oblivion. We get some dialogue with young boy, who is trying to keep the world safe until the next death eclipse. Sarah claims their powers can be used for creation instead of destruction and joins him. Our party gets their final words in, and the fight with the True Oblivion begins. The special feature, or unpleasant surprise, of choosing Sarah as the protagonist is the Forced Super Commander mode at the end of the game. Sarah's special commander mode in this fight lets her control all the characters not involved in a formation attack every round. She's basically the Oblivion's worst nightmare. She gets all the benefits of commander mode with the strength of being able to control her party at an individual level. Sarah can toss powerful healing items from the bag at party members every turn, but she won't be able to contribute to damage directly. It's extremely powerful, as you'll see in this fight, but if you were expecting to use Sarah in the final battle, it's also a very unpleasant surprise when the game takes her out of the party for this fight. I'm going to let the fight play out while I explain everything because there's a lot to explain with this fight. Even the weakened version of the Oblivion can be difficult due to the intricacies of the fight in regards to its Wings of Light and Void Wings forms for anybody fighting it for the first time. I prepared for the fight by putting Gaze, Net, and Reaper's Scythe evasion skills on my party to prevent some nasty ailments and life point hacks. I also put Staffs of Vivacity on my Dragon's Descent users to pop for full party recovery in case of emergency. I did end up popping one in the end when the Void Field was overwhelming my party with damage. I chose the strategy Preemptive Attack for this fight, which has a chance of giving my party the first strike against the enemy, but it does have a chance of failing and then the enemy will get to move first. The True Oblivion has an extra form for each undefeated Sinistral on the 4 paths branching from the center that I did not explore. However, I managed to hit this boss so hard so quickly that I triggered a bug where you never actually see it transform between the different forms visually, even though it is transforming, if that makes sense. Every time it changes its form, it also gets increased stats. This means that over the weakened form, it has twice as much health, and it's capable of using the abilities of the Sinistrals depending on its form. You'll also notice I'm more conservative with my powerful support spells. That's because each time it changes form, any support spells I have on my party are removed. This actually makes the usual power spells like Parhelion, Shadow Servant, Revive, and Dragon's Ascent somewhat less valuable early in the fight, as spending turns to cast them just serve to drag out an already long fight and wear down my MP. Several times later in the fight, the Oblivion will spawn a Void Wing and summon an Eclipse, creating an Abyss Field that will engulf the area, draining my party's health at the end of every turn. During these moments, it's instinctual to want to heal your party, but the best thing to do is actually to attack and try to change the field. If your team is successful, they'll kick the field out, changing the Oblivion back into its Wings of Light form. This also has the effect of recovering health lost from the Abyss Field and can even revive dead party members. I like to use Light Wall, and maybe even spells like Dragon's Descent, even if they'll get dispelled at these moments, to reduce the damage my party takes and contribute to changing the field off of Abyss. When the Oblivion is on its last legs, there will be a screen dialogue from young boy or Sarah immediately after it goes into Void Wings. At this point, it's important to get the Revives, Dragon Descents, Shadow Servants, and Parhelions up, as the field will permanently be in Abyss until you defeat the boss, so your spells will not get dispelled anymore. If you're low on healing or MP, it's best to just go on an all-out assault, since you might be able to pull out a victory before the Oblivion wears you out. Since you can't kick it out of Void Wings, recovery becomes more important too. Some disastrous things that can happen in the fight are him taking control of one of your strongest allies and using them to wipe out your party. He can also use Fatal Mirror to retarget an ally's attack onto another party member. There are also some pretty bad status ailments I didn't have to worry about so much thanks to my equipment, commander mode, and the evasion skills I put on my characters before the fight. The True Oblivion also inherits all the nastiest attacks that the 4 Sinistrals have, so things can get really bad really quick. Regardless of how well you prepare, there's always a degree of luck and RNG involved in the fight. Personally, I think it makes it more fun, since no 2 fights against the True Oblivion are ever going to be the same. We manage everything well and eventually win the fight. The more playable characters you've become involved with on your journey, the richer the game's ending will be. Some protagonists will have multiple possible endings depending on choices and actions taken during their playthroughs. This video covered most of the common events every protagonist can potentially become involved in. It could even be used as something of a walkthrough or source of information for many of the game's more obscure mechanics like formations, crowns, and commander mode. But believe me when I say playthroughs with characters like Mikhail and Katerina would be different from this one. The protagonists also have their own theme songs that play too, and while I provided samples of my favorites, there are plenty of amazing songs in this game for people who actually play it. Among the Saga series, Romancing SaGa 3 is definitely one of the most well-loved games internationally, and a personal favorite of mine. It has inspired the creation of games like Alliance Alive and The Legend of Legacy. It's just complex enough to be interesting and distinguish itself from other JRPGs, but not too overwhelming like some other games in the series can be. It's not a game I'd recommend to anybody who has never played a game in the Saga series though. I think Saga Frontier is the best introduction to this series as it simplifies weapons into less categories and introduces the complexity through racial party options like the original Final Fantasy Legends titles did on the Game Boy. Furthermore, the protagonist choices in that game have more striking differences in their narratives and gameplay, inviting more replayability on that front. Romancing SaGa Minstrel's Song Remastered is the true magnum opus of the Saga series though. It's by far the most complex Saga game with the steepest learning curve. Every complexity added to the game just enriches its gameplay and adds so much satisfaction for players that master the mechanics. The fact that it's a remaster of a remake of a game Nintendo themselves pushed Akitoshi Kawazu at Squaresoft to create on their, at the time, unannounced Super Famicom platform in 1990 is a testament to its high quality. And while the game doesn't hit a lot of all-time top lists, even among fans of JRPGs, I personally consider it one of the greatest JRPGs ever made. But that's a topic for another video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.